There are moments in life that split everything into before and after. Moments when you realize you'll never be the same again. Mine happened at 3 in the morning, when my married neighbor knocked on my door with tear-marked cheeks he was trying to hide. My name is Lucas Andrade, I'm 28, and I work as a graphic designer. I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment in Vila Madalena, São Paulo, where I moved 8 months ago trying to start over after a breakup that left me afraid of feeling anything again. My world was small, safe, predictable. My social life amounted to polite nods in the elevator, food deliveries and video calls with clients who never really saw my face. I liked it that way. It didn't hurt when you didn't let yourself connect with anyone, but that Thursday dawn changed everything. I was working late, as always. My glasses kept sliding down my nose as I adjusted layers in Photoshop, the monitor's glow lighting up the mess of my makeshift office. Design books scattered across the desk, mugs of cold coffee, the window open to let in humid air and the distant hum of cars on the avenue. It was my routine, my refuge. Then I heard the knocking. It wasn't a normal knock. It was insistent, urgent, almost desperate. 3 loud bangs that made my heart jump into my throat. I looked at the clock in the corner of the screen. 3:15 a.m. Who the hell knocks on someone's door at that hour? My first reaction was fear. I thought robbery, some emergency in the building, 1,000 bad scenarios. I got up slowly, heart racing, and went to the door in silence, trying to look through the peephole without making a sound. And then I saw him. Rafael Costa, my neighbor across the hall. 34, a civil engineer, married for 5 years to Amanda, a woman who always seemed to carry a calculated chill in her gaze. I'd known Rafael since the day I moved in, when he helped me haul a heavy piece of furniture up the stairs because the elevator was broken. It was a simple, practical interaction. But I remembered his smile, the way our eyes met for a second longer than necessary, the strange feeling that something unsaid was hanging in the air. Since then, we'd crossed paths in the hall 2 or 3 times a week, always polite, always superficial. He in his neatly pressed dress shirt even at home, his wedding band shining on his finger, the confident posture of someone who's got everything figured out. Me in my worn t-shirt, messy hair, crooked glasses, looking exactly like what I was, someone who lived alone and avoided sustained eye contact. But I noticed him. Of course I noticed him. It was impossible not to notice Rafael, the way he walked down the hall with that solid presence, his deep voice greeting the other residents, the contrast between the outward confidence and something I swore I could read between the lines, something that seemed to be crying out for help but never allowed. I tried not to think about it. I tried not to think about him. But there he was, on the other side of my door at 3 in the morning, not the secure man I knew. He had disheveled hair, red, watery eyes, hands trembling slightly as he stared at the floor like he didn't know where he was. He wore only a white t-shirt and gray sweatpants, barefoot. He looked lost. He looked broken. I opened the door slowly, still not understanding what was happening. "Lucas," he said, his voice hoarse, almost inaudible. "Sorry about the time. I just needed to talk to someone." I didn't know what to say. We barely knew each other. We might exchange 20 words a month. And now he was on my doorstep in the middle of the night, clearly in crisis, asking to enter my life in a way I wasn't prepared to handle. "Of course," I said, because what else could I say? "Come in." He came in slowly, looking around my apartment as if trying to orient himself. I shut the door, the click of the latch sounding louder than it should. Suddenly the space felt smaller, more intimate, more dangerous. The air was thick with something I couldn't name. "Sit down, please," I said, pointing to the shabby couch pushed against the exposed brick wall. "Want some water? Coffee?" "Water," he murmured, and collapsed onto the couch as if his legs couldn't hold him. I went to the kitchen with trembling hands, trying to process what was happening. Rafael Costa, the married neighbor who always seemed to have it all under control, was sitting on my couch at 3 in the morning in the middle of an emotional collapse. Why? What had happened? A fight with his wife? Some family tragedy? Why had he come to me? I came back with a glass of cold water and sat in the office chair on the other side of the room, keeping my distance. He drank in silence, eyes glued to the floor, breathing still uneven. Silence stretched for a full minute. 2, 3. I didn't know whether to ask something, wait, or pretend this was normal. My heart raced. There was something in the air, an electricity, a tension that made my skin prickle. Finally, he spoke. "Lucas, have you ever felt trapped in your own life?" The question caught me off guard. It wasn't what I expected. It wasn't about his wife, not about work, not about anything concrete. It was something much deeper, much more dangerous. "What do you mean?" I asked, adjusting my glasses nervously. He lifted his eyes for the first time and really looked at me. And that look. My God, that look. It wasn't the polite look of a neighbor, nor the casual hallway glance. It was a look loaded with desperation and vulnerability. A silent cry for help I wasn't sure I was ready to answer. "Like waking up every day and realizing you're living someone else's life," he said, his voice breaking. "Like every step you take, every word you say, every decision you make is part of a script someone else wrote for you. But you never wanted to follow it." I swallowed hard. It was too intimate, too personal, too real. This wasn't neighborly small talk. It was a confession from the soul. And I didn't understand why he was telling me this. Why me? Why now? Why in the middle of the night when the whole world was asleep and there was just the two of us in that tiny apartment with the door closed between us and the rest of reality? I guess everyone feels like that sometimes, I tried. But the words came out weak, inadequate. "No," Raphael said, shaking his head slowly. "It's not sometimes. It's every single day. Waking up next to someone you're supposed to love but who's never really seen you. Going to work, coming home, smiling in the right places, saying the right things, wearing the right clothes, living the right life, and feeling like you're dying inside. The person you really are is screaming down there but nobody hears. Not even you, sometimes." He stopped talking and ran his hands over his face, trying to hide the tears beginning to fall again. I sat frozen in the chair, not knowing what to do, not knowing what to say, feeling my own chest tighten because those words, in some strange and frightening way, made sense to me too. I knew what it was to build walls, to hide parts of yourself, to live in fear of feeling. "Why did you come here, Raphael?" I asked softly. The question was loaded with everything I wasn't saying. Why me? Why now? What do you want from me? He was silent for a long moment, staring at the wedding ring on his finger. He spun the band slowly, as if seeing it for the first time. When he finally spoke, his voice was so low I almost didn't hear it. "Because I think you understand." My stomach dropped. Because I think you understand. What did that mean? What did he think I understood? And more importantly, what was he about to confess? Understand what? I pushed, even though my voice trembled. He lifted his eyes again, and this time his gaze didn't look away. It was direct, intense, vulnerably so, and it made me want to look elsewhere while also holding me completely captive. "I see you, Lucas," he said, and each word fell like a stone into the silence of the apartment. "I see you in the hallway. I see you coming back with coffee from the bakery and pretending not to notice me. I see you in the elevator staring at the floor, but I know you feel it. Because I feel it too." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. The air felt heavier, warmer, as if the apartment had shrunk even more, and there was no longer any room to hide whatever was happening between us. "I don't know what you're talking about," I lied, but the lie was so obvious I didn't even believe it myself. "You do," Raphael said, and for the first time that night he gave something that almost looked like a smile, but was too sad to be called a smile. "You know, I see it in your eyes every time we pass. It's the same thing I feel. The same fear, the same confusion, the same need to pretend it isn't there, and that same thing that keeps you awake at night, making you realize you can't fake it anymore." I couldn't breathe properly. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. Raphael was married. He had a life, a wife on the other side of the hall, An entire structure he was risking by being there telling me these things. And I had spent the last 2 years building walls so high around my heart, I was sure no one could climb them. But there he was, sitting on my couch, looking at me as if I were the only person in the world who could understand the weight he carried. And the worst part? He was right. I understood. "Raphael," I began, but I didn't know how to finish the sentence. What was I going to say? That he was right? That I'd felt that strange tension in our hallway encounters too? That I'd spent sleepless nights thinking about his smile, the way his voice sounded saying my name, the ring on his finger like a constant reminder that this was impossible, wrong, and dangerous. "I know this is crazy," he went on, his voice growing firmer now, as if finally saying it out loud had broken some dam inside him. "I know I shouldn't be here. I know I should be on the other side of the hall, in my bed, next to my wife, living the life I built. But I can't take it anymore, Lucas. I can't keep pretending I'm okay, that I'm who everyone thinks I am." And then he said the sentence that changed everything. "I see you watching me sometimes, and for the first time in years, I feel truly seen." Those words hung in the air between us like something alive. "I see you watching me sometimes, and for the first time in years, I feel truly seen." I didn't know if what I was feeling was fear, relief, panic, or some impossible mix of all three. All I knew was that my heart was pounding so hard Raphael could probably hear it. I didn't know what to say. How do you respond when someone admits out loud something you've spent months trying to convince yourself was only in your head? When someone breaks the silent agreement not to acknowledge that tension that hummed every time you passed in the hallway? Raphael kept looking at me, and for the first time, I saw something different in his eyes. Not raw desperation anymore, but something softer. More dangerous, maybe. It was hope. And I didn't know if I could handle that. "Raphael," I started again, but my voice came out weak, hesitant. I stopped, took a deep breath, took off my glasses and ran my hand over my face. A habit I'd had since I was a kid when I needed time to think. When I put my glasses back on, he was still looking at me, waiting. "You know what this is?" I halted, searching for the right word. "Complicated. You're married, you have a whole life on the other side of that hallway, and I'm not the kind of person who gets involved in that kind of situation." "I know," he said quietly. "I know all that, Lucas. Do you think I don't know? Do you think I haven't spent the last months reminding myself of that every time I saw you? Every time I made up a stupid excuse to be in the hallway when you came back from the bakery? Every time I heard your footsteps in the corridor and had to hold myself back from opening the door?" His voice was getting more intense now, not angry, but urgent and exhausted, as if he'd been holding those words in so long they'd started to poison him from the inside. "I know exactly how wrong this is. I know I shouldn't be here. I know I should be in bed, next to Amanda, sleeping like a normal person would at 3 in the morning. But I can't anymore, Lucas. I can't keep pretending that everything is fine, that I'm fine, that I'm who everyone thinks I am." He stopped, ran his hands through his hair, and for a second I saw the ring glinting under the dim light of my table. That ring. That small metal symbol representing a whole life, an entire structure I had no right to question. "And who are you, Raphael?" The question slipped out before I could think it through. Because from what I can see, you're a guy who built a whole life, who has a steady job, a wife, an apartment, probably plans for the future. You're the guy everyone thinks has it all figured out. So tell me, who are you that's so different from that? "I don't know," he answered. And for the first time since he'd arrived, I heard his voice truly crack. "I don't know, Lucas. And that's what kills me. That's what keeps me awake at night. That's why I'm here now, at 3 in the morning, sitting on the couch of a neighbor I barely know, trying to understand why I feel more myself here, in this apartment, with you, than I have in my own home for the last 5 years. The silence that followed was different. Not awkward or tense anymore. It was the kind of silence that happens when someone admits a truth so deep that words can't continue. It needs room to breathe. I should have said something, offered comfort, or some answer that made sense. But all I could think was that I understood exactly what he was saying. I knew, in a way I couldn't explain, what it felt like to feel invisible in your own life. I feel invisible, Raphael continued, his voice lower now, like he was talking to himself. You know what that's like? Waking up every day doing all the right things, saying all the right things, being who everyone expects you to be, and feeling like nobody really sees you? That nobody knows who you actually are beneath it all? I know, I answered before I could stop myself. And it was the first time I had spoken with conviction since he'd arrived. I know exactly what it's like. Raphael looked up at me, surprised, as if he hadn't expected me to understand. As if he'd come here expecting rejection, judgment, maybe to be sent away, but not understanding. I moved to São Paulo 8 months ago, I began. And once I started talking, I couldn't stop. I came here thinking I'd start over. Build a new life, meet new people, maybe find someone who'd make me feel alive again. But all I did was lock myself in this apartment, work behind a screen, and avoid any real connection. Why? Raphael asked softly. Because my heart was broken 2 years ago, and since then, I've been so afraid to open up. I built walls so high I can't even climb them myself anymore. I spent so much time protecting myself that I forgot what it felt like to let someone in. I looked at him, and for the first time, it felt like we were actually talking. It wasn't Raphael, the desperate married neighbor, anymore. It wasn't Lucas, the lonely designer, anymore. We were just two people at 3 in the morning admitting things we might never have admitted to anyone before. And then you showed up, I continued. From the first day you helped me carry the bookcase, I paused, searching for words. I noticed you. And I've spent the last 8 months trying not to. Trying to convince myself it was just admiration, curiosity, anything other than what it actually was. And what was it really? His voice was so low I could barely hear, but I heard it. God. I heard every word as if it were amplified. Attraction, I admitted. And it was like all the air left the apartment at once. Connection. That strange thing that happens when you look at someone and feel like you've known them forever, even though you've barely talked. That sense of recognition that makes no sense but is there anyway. Raphael closed his eyes for a second, and when he opened them again, I saw they were shining. They weren't tears, not exactly, but something was happening there. Something was changing. I thought it was just me, he said. I thought I was going crazy. That I was projecting things that weren't there because I was so desperate to feel something, anything. That wasn't that constant emptiness. It wasn't just you, I said, and I could hardly believe I was saying it out loud. It wasn't just you, Raphael. I saw you too. I saw when you made excuses to be in the hallway. I saw when you took longer than necessary to lock the door when I passed by. I saw everything, and I pretended not to because it was easier that way. Because acknowledging it would mean having to do something about it, and I didn't know what to do. And now? He asked. What do we do now that we've acknowledged it? I don't know, I answered honestly. I really don't know, Raphael. You're married. You have a whole life I can't and won't interfere with. And I'm too afraid to let anyone in for real. So I don't know what we do with this. But you feel it, he insisted. And it wasn't a question. It was a confirmation. You feel it too. I feel it, I admitted. And it was as if those 2 words had physical weight. I feel it, Raphael. And it terrifies me. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. It was the kind of laugh you make when crying is the only alternative. It terrifies me too, he said. So much that I spent the last 3 hours walking around the apartment, looking at Amanda sleeping, trying to convince myself not to come here. But I couldn't. I couldn't stay there anymore. Pretending I was asleep, pretending I was fine, pretending I didn't want to be here. I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, I let him see me. I let down all those defenses I'd built so carefully. And it was terrifying and freeing at the same time. What do you want from me, Raphael? I asked, and my voice came out more vulnerable than I intended. Why did you really come here tonight? He was silent for a long moment, and I could see the struggle inside him. I saw the married man fighting the man who wanted to be honest. I saw fear wrestling with need. And then, finally, he spoke. I came here because you're the only person I think can understand me. Because when I look at you, I see someone struggling too. Someone trying to figure out who they really are beneath all the protection and fear. And I needed to be near someone who understood, even if it's just tonight, even if we never talk about this again. I just needed not to be alone in my own head for a few hours. "You're not alone," I said, and it was the truest thing I had said all night. "You're not alone, Raphael. I understand. Maybe more than you think." He nodded, and in that moment I saw something settle in him. As if finally, after hours of tension, he could really breathe. But at the same time, the air between us grew thicker. Because now, there was no denying it anymore. There was no pretending this was just a casual conversation between neighbors. We had admitted it. Out loud. To each other and to ourselves. And that admission changed everything. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't easy either. It was heavy. It was that kind of silence where you feel every beat of your heart, every breath, every little movement. It was the kind of silence where the truth hangs in the air between two people, visible and undeniable, and nobody quite knows what to do with it. Raphael looked at the window, at the city that kept sleeping outside, oblivious to our little world inside. When he looked back at me, there was something different in his eyes. It wasn't desperation anymore. It wasn't just fear. It was recognition. It was acceptance. And maybe, just maybe, it was hope. And that hope was the most dangerous thing of all. I hadn't imagined when I woke that Tuesday morning that my life was about to change. Not dramatically, not with fireworks or grand declarations, but in a quiet way, the kind you only notice later, when you look back and see that something fundamental shifted inside you. And that hope I saw in Raphael's eyes, that dangerous, beautiful hope, was exactly that. A shift. A crack in the structure I had so carefully built around my heart. I stood up. I needed to move. Sitting there, with him looking at me like that, was starting to make my chest tighten in a way I could no longer ignore. I walked to the window and rested my forehead against the cold glass. Outside, the city slept. A few windows still lit here and there, other lives awake in the middle of the night. Each with their own internal battles, their own secrets. "Do you know what's the scariest part of all this?" I said, still looking out. "It's not what you're feeling. It's not what I'm feeling. It's that, deep down, I think we always knew. Since that first day when you helped me with the bookshelf." I heard Raphael shift on the sofa behind me. His breathing changed, became more conscious, more alert. I didn't understand at the time, I continued. I thought it was just politeness, you know? A neighbor being kind. But then, every time we met in the hallway, every time you stopped to exchange those two words, I felt it. I felt there was something more. And I tried to ignore it. I tried so hard. I convinced myself it was in my head, that I was projecting, that I was seeing things that weren't there. I paused, running a hand through my hair. My glasses were fogged from the heat of my forehead against the glass. I took them off, wiped them on my t-shirt, put them back on. But it wasn't just in my head, was it? I turned to him then, and my voice came out more vulnerable than I'd like. I wasn't imagining anything. You felt it too. You noticed it too. Raphael was looking at me in a way I'd never seen before. He wasn't the polite neighbor anymore. He wasn't the married man trying to keep up appearances. It was just Raphael, stripped of all those layers of protection, as vulnerable as I felt in that moment. "I felt it," he said, and his voice was hoarse. "I felt it so much it hurt physically. Do you have any idea how many times I made up excuses to be in the hallway when I knew you were going to leave? How many times I pretended to be checking the mail just for a chance to see you?" He laughed, but there was nothing joyful in that sound. It was the laugh of someone who'd just admitted something he'd kept for a long time. My wife even joked about it once, said I was obsessed with the new neighbor, always bringing you up. And I denied it, of course, said she was being silly. But inside I was terrified. If she was noticing, it meant I wasn't hiding it well enough. I went back to the armchair. But this time I sat on the edge, closer to him. The space between us had shrunk, physically and emotionally. I could see the details of his face now. The small lines around his eyes, the shadow of stubble, The way the wedding band caught the dim light from the lamp. That ring. Impossible to ignore. Impossible to pretend it wasn't there. "Why did you never say anything?" I asked, and the question came out almost as a whisper. Why did you never, even subtly, give any hint that there was something more? Raphael closed his eyes for a moment, as if the question hurt. "Because I'm a coward," he answered, brutally honest. "Because I built my entire life on doing the right things, following the rules, meeting expectations. I married Amanda because it was expected, because my parents wanted it, because my friends approved, because it was safe, predictable, what I was supposed to do." He opened his eyes and stared at me, and I convinced myself it was okay. That love comes with time, that compatibility matters more than passion, that security is worth more than authenticity. So many lies I ended up believing. Until you showed up. My heart was pounding so hard he could probably hear it. I didn't know what to say. There were no words for the intensity of what I was feeling. "And when you appeared," Raphael continued, his voice more passionate and urgent, "all those lies began to crumble. Because suddenly, for the first time in my life, I felt something real. Something not constructed, not forced, not convenient. Just true." "You barely know me," I said, my voice trembling. "We've had what? 10 conversations at most? How can you be sure this is real and not just some fantasy, some projection of what you want to exist?" He leaned forward, closing the distance. I could feel his warmth now, his cologne mixed with something uniquely him. "You're right," he said. "We don't really know each other. We don't know each other's fears, dreams, or what keeps us awake. But I know the essentials, Lucas. I know how you are when you think no one's watching. I know that look of loneliness you carry when you come home late. I know how you sometimes stop in the hallway, gathering the courage to open your door and step into that empty apartment. Every word was a revelation. Every sentence told me he had been watching me as much as I had been watching him. That connection I thought was one-sided, that attraction I was sure belonged only to me, was mutual. It was real. "And you," I managed to say, barely whispering. "I know how you breathe deeper before going into your apartment, like you're putting on armor. I know how your smile never reaches your eyes when you're with her. I know that sadness in your shoulders, even when you're pretending everything's fine." The silence that settled afterward wasn't empty. It was dense, loaded with everything that hadn't yet been said, with everything both of us were feeling, but didn't yet have the courage to name. Raphael looked down at his hands, at the wedding band shining there, a symbol of promises made and lives intertwined. I saw his jaw muscle tighten. I saw the struggle happening inside him again. "I've never been that kind of person," he finally said. "Never the cheating type, never the lying type, never the promise-breaking type. I've always taken pride in my integrity, in being reliable, predictable, the kind of guy people can count on." Then he lifted his eyes to me. "But since you showed up, I don't recognize who I am anymore. I spend hours thinking about you. I make up reasons to be in the hallway, to cross your path, to hear your voice. And I hate myself for it. I hate myself because I know what it means. I know what I'm doing to my wife, to myself, to you. But at the same time, I've never felt more alive than when I'm near you." "You're not doing anything to me," I said, and finally found the courage to do what I'd wanted since he walked in. I reached out and lightly touched his arm. Just the slightest touch, my fingers against his shirt. But it was like an electric circuit had closed between us. Raphael looked at the spot where my hand touched his arm, and I saw his breathing change, become more shallow. "I'm here by choice," I continued, and once I started touching him, I couldn't stop. My hand slid down his arm until our fingers intertwined, natural and terrifying at the same time. "I leave the door open when I see you in the hallway because I want you to come in. I linger in the elevator because I don't want that moment to end. I know exactly what I'm doing, Raphael, and I choose it anyway." Our hands were linked now, and I could feel his pulse racing under my palm. His eyes had darkened, the intensity with which he was looking at me. "This is madness," he whispered, but he didn't let go. "This is going to end badly." Probably, I agreed, and for the first time all night, I smiled. a small, sad, but genuine smile. But in this moment, this early morning, in this apartment where the world can't reach us, I don't care. I saw when the last barrier inside him crumbled. In his eyes, the way his shoulders relaxed, how the tension finally released. Not surrender. Acceptance. Stopping the fight against something he couldn't deny anymore. Raphael squeezed my hand, and the gesture was so charged it almost hurt. "I'm so scared," he said, his voice breaking. "Scared of what this means. Scared of what I'll have to face. Scared of losing everything I've built. But I'm so tired of being afraid, Lucas. Exhausted of pretending, repressing, living a life that isn't mine." "You don't have to decide anything tonight," I said softly. "You don't have to fix everything now, or make grand declarations. You just have to be here, be honest, be yourself." He nodded, and I saw tears forming at the corners of his eyes. Tears he didn't try to hide or wipe away. He just let them be there, another symbol of the complete vulnerability that had settled between us. "You know what's the strangest thing?" Raphael said after a moment. "I came here tonight without knowing what I was looking for. I came desperate, confused, running from something I couldn't bear any longer. But now, sitting here, holding your hand, I finally understand what I was searching for." "What?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. "Permission," he said simply. "Permission to be who I really am. Permission to feel what I really feel. And somehow, you gave me that. Just by existing. Just by seeing me for real." I felt something break inside me, but it wasn't painful. Like removing a cast after a broken bone heals. It hurts, but it's the right kind of pain, the kind that means healing. I was looking for permission too, I admitted. Permission to trust again. To feel again. To believe that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't destined to be alone forever. We stayed like that for a time that could have been minutes or hours. Time had lost its meaning. There was only that moment, that space between us that had become sacred in its honesty. Raphael leaned closer, and my heart raced. So close I could count his eyelashes, see the gold flecks in his eyes, feel his breath on my skin. "Lucas." He said my name like a prayer, like a confession, like a question he didn't know how to ask. "I'm here," I answered, and it was all I needed to say. The distance between us shrank even more. I could see his pulse beating at the side of his neck, quickened, alive, real. I could feel the heat from his body, so close that one movement would erase the distance between us completely. And it was at that moment, with him so close, I could almost taste the anticipation in the air, that something changed in his expression. His eyes widened slightly, as if he'd just realized where we were, what we were doing, what was about to happen. I saw fear return, mixed with desire, creating a whirlwind of emotions that showed on his face like an open book. "Raphael," I said softly, giving him an out if that's what he needed. "It's okay. You don't have to—" "No," he interrupted, and his voice was steady despite the tremor I could feel in his hand. "Don't pull away. Please. I just need a second to understand that this is real. That you're real." "I'm here," I repeated, and this time I let my other hand rise to lightly touch his face. The skin was warm under my fingers, and I felt him lean into my touch, like a plant reaching for the sun. "This is real," I said, and every word carried the weight of all the truth I had inside me. "You're real. I'm real. And what we're feeling right now, in this moment, is the most real thing I've ever experienced in my life." He closed his eyes, and a single tear ran down his cheek, wetting my fingers. When he opened them again, there was a clarity there that hadn't been before. A decision had been made, not about the future, not about what would come next, but about that present moment. "I've never wanted anything as much as I want to stay here with you now," he confessed. And the brutal honesty of that statement took my breath away. "Then stay," I said. And it was as simple as that. As complicated as that. Raphael nodded slowly, and I saw the tension finally leave his shoulders when he allowed himself to relax into that moment, that truth, that connection that neither of us could deny any longer. He leaned in closer, and my breath caught in my throat. And there we were, suspended in that impossible moment, where time seemed to have forgotten how to work. His hand in mine, his breath so close I could feel it on my skin. His eyes full of so many unspoken things. It was like looking at an entire book, written in a language I was only beginning to learn. Raphael didn't pull away. He didn't run. He just stayed there, as if he needed to prove to himself this was real, that I was real, that what he was feeling wasn't just another fantasy to bury. "I've never told anyone this," he finally said, so low I had to lean closer to hear. "About what I really feel, about who I really am." The words came out of him like a confession in an empty church, carrying the weight of years of silence, of pretending, of living a life that felt written for someone else. "I married because it was expected of me," he continued, his words speeding up. "Because my parents wanted it. Because my friends were all getting married. Because it's easier to follow the script than admit it's wrong." His hand tightened on mine, and I felt him tremor each word, a physical effort, torn from somewhere deep inside. "Amanda is a good person," he said, guilt in his voice. "She doesn't deserve a husband playing a role, forcing himself to feel things he doesn't, wishing he could love her the way she deserves." "Raphael," I began, but he shook his head. "No, let me finish," he said, and now there were tears forming at the corners of his eyes. "I need to say this. I need someone to know. I need you to know." I nodded, holding his hand with both of mine now, offering the only thing I had to give in that moment. My presence, my attention, my complete and unconditional acceptance of everything he was about to reveal. "When I see you in the hallway," he confessed, his voice cracking slightly, "when we pass and you smile or just nod before going inside, it's the most honest part of my day. Those 5 seconds where I don't have to pretend, where I can just be." A tear ran down his face, glinting in the dim light of my desk. "And that terrifies me, Lucas," he continued, his voice trembling. "I built my whole life around not feeling this, around not being this, and then you show up with your crooked glasses and your shyness and tear it all down without trying." I was speechless. "What do you say when someone hands you their heart like that, bare and bleeding, with no protection?" "I didn't come here expecting you to fix my life," he said, tears falling freely. "I didn't expect you to tell me what to do or that this would lead somewhere. I came because I can't stand pretending anymore. I can't stand living an edited version of myself. And with you, even if it's just for a few hours in the middle of the night when no one's watching, I can be real." Something inside me broke when I heard that. Broke and rebuilt at the same time into something completely different. "You're real," I said, and my own voice was shaky now. "You've always been real. You were just hiding behind all those layers of expectation and fear." He looked at me then, really looked, and it was like he was seeing me for the first time. Like every other time our eyes had met in the hallway had only been rehearsals for this moment. "How can you look at me like that?" he asked, almost whispering. "How can you look at me knowing all this, knowing the mess my life is, and still make me feel like I'm not a disaster?" "Because you're not a disaster," I answered simply. "You're a person trying to find your way in a world that taught you to hide. And that doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." Raphael closed his eyes, tears sliding down his face. I could see the struggle inside him, the battle between who he'd been trained to be and who he really was. "I'm so scared," he admitted, barely audible. "Scared of what this means. Scared of what I'll face. Scared of losing everything I've built." "I understand," I said, and I did. That fear more than he knew. The fear of being seen, of being known, that once you remove the mask, you can't put it back on. "But you know what's scarier?" I continued, finding unexpected courage. "Reaching the end of your life and realizing you never really lived, that you spent every day playing a role someone else wrote for you." He opened his eyes then, and there was something different in them, something softer, more true. "That's exactly how I feel," he said. "Like I'm watching my own life from outside, seeing this stranger go to work, come home, kiss his wife, Sleep, wake up and repeat. And I'm screaming from inside, trying to tell him this isn't the way, but he can't hear me. I'm listening now, I said, squeezing his hand. And I see you. The real person. Not the version you think you have to be. Raphael looked at me for a long moment, and then something in him finally gave. All those defenses carefully built, all those walls he'd raised to protect himself from the world and from himself, simply crumbled. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to mine, and sobbed. Not a quiet, contained cry. The kind of sob that comes from somewhere so deep you didn't know it existed. The kind that happens when you finally stop fighting yourself. I didn't try to stop him. I didn't say it was okay, because it wasn't. His life was complicated. His marriage was a lie, and we were sitting in my apartment at 4 a.m. facing truths neither of us was ready for. But somehow, in that moment, with his forehead against mine, and his tears wetting my face too, everything felt exactly where it should be. I held him as he cried, my hands wrapped around his, my heart pounding so hard he could probably feel it. And I realized something fundamental. This wasn't about romance or passion or desire or any of those movie things. This was about being seen. Really seen. By another person who understood, didn't judge, and offered a safe space to finally stop pretending. How long we stayed like that, I don't know. Time didn't work right that early morning. Could have been minutes or hours. All that mattered was that there, in that small apartment, with city lights filtering through the window, 2 people had allowed themselves to be completely honest. Eventually, Raphael's crying quieted. He pulled back, wiping his face with the back of his hand, ashamed of the intensity that had poured out. "Sorry," he said, his voice hoarse. "I didn't mean to. I didn't want to." "No," I interrupted firmly. "Don't apologize. Never apologize for being real with me." He looked at me, half gratitude, half astonishment, as if he couldn't believe there was someone who wouldn't run away when his armor finally fell. "I've never been like this with anyone," he said finally. "Not my parents, not my best friends. Definitely not Amanda. You're the first person who sees me like this and doesn't run. I'm not going anywhere, I promised. And it was the truest thing I'd ever said." Raphael took my hand again, intertwining our fingers naturally, as if our hands were made to fit like this. "What do we do now?" he asked, no expectation in his voice. Not a question about relationships or the future or anything practical. A deeper question. What do you do when you finally admit the truth about who you are? "I don't know," I admitted honestly. "I don't have magic answers or easy fixes. All I know is you don't have to carry this alone anymore." He nodded slowly, processing. "Have you ever been afraid of being happy?" he asked suddenly, a question so unexpected it caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Like allowing yourself to be happy, truly happy, is dangerous somehow," he explained. "Like the universe will notice and take everything away?" "Yes," I admitted, thinking of my own scars, of the relationship that had wrecked me 2 years ago. "I know exactly what you mean. I feel that way now," he confessed. "Sitting here with you, holding your hand, being truly seen for the first time, I'm terrified. Because I know that when the sun comes up and I walk back down that hall, this will end. Going back will hurt 10 times worse now." He gestured between us. What it's like to not have to pretend. My chest tightened with the brutal sadness of that. The raw honesty of admitting this moment had an expiration date. That no matter how real it was, the world outside still existed, with all its complications and consequences. "Maybe it doesn't have to end," I said cautiously. "Maybe this is the beginning of you finally living for real. Not necessarily with me, not necessarily romantically, but living authentically." "Do you think that's possible?" he asked, so much longing in his voice. The desire to believe, the desire for hope. "I think you deserve to find out," I answered. Raphael looked at our clasped hands, at how my thumb traced unconscious circles on the back of his hand, a comforting gesture so natural I hadn't noticed I was doing it. "I don't want to leave," he whispered softly. Then don't, I said simply. Not yet. The sun hasn't risen. He lifted his eyes to me, and in that look was so much gratitude, fear, hope, desire, and something deeper I couldn't name, but felt in my chest. Thank you, he said, and that single word carried the weight of everything he couldn't express. We sat on my old couch, hands entwined, looking at each other as if we were the most interesting thing we'd ever seen. Maybe we were. After spending so long staring at fake versions of ourselves, seeing someone real was the most fascinating thing possible. Outside, the city slept. An occasional car passed. Somewhere, a dog barked. Normal life unfolding while inside that small apartment, something extraordinary was happening. It wasn't the kind of extraordinary people write about in books. There were no cinematic kisses or dramatic declarations. It was the quiet kind of extraordinary. The kind that happens when two people finally stop lying, to themselves and to each other, and simply exist together in the naked truth of who they really are. Raphael rested his head on my shoulder, a gesture so simple but so meaningful it stung my eyes. I could stay like this forever, he murmured. Me too, I admitted. And there we stayed, while the clock marked the impossible hours. Two strangers who were no longer strangers. Two lonely people who'd found, even if just for a stolen moment, someone who really understood. Someone who saw. Someone who didn't run. His hand in mine, warm and real and trembling. My heart beating too hard. His breathing slowing as the emotional storm finally subsided. And I knew, with a certainty that went beyond logic, that none of us would be the same after that night. That something fundamental had changed. Not necessarily between us, although that too, but inside us. Raphael had faced his truth head-on and hadn't looked away. And I had allowed someone to see me again. Really see me, despite all the fear of being hurt. We had been brave together. And that courage, that brutal honesty, that naked vulnerability would be worth it, no matter what happened when the sun rose. We stayed like that for a time outside of normal time, his hand in mine. My heart beating so hard he could probably feel it. His breathing finally calming, becoming deeper and more regular. And then suddenly, Raphael did something I didn't expect. He asked about me. Lucas, he said softly, lifting his head from my shoulder, but without letting go of my hand. You mentioned you moved to São Paulo 8 months ago. Were you running from something too? I blinked, surprised by the shift in focus. Throughout that impossible night, I had been the observer, the confidant, the one holding space for his emotional storm. And now he was asking about my own scars. My throat tightened. I think so, I finally admitted. I was running away, or at least trying to leave some things behind. Raphael turned his whole body to face me, and I saw something new in his eyes. It wasn't just desperation or relief anymore. It was genuine curiosity, real interest. As if, after finally taking his own weight off his chest, he had room to really see me. What happened? He asked gently. I looked at our intertwined hands, his thicker, marked from work, and mine stained with printer ink and shaky from too much coffee. I fell in love, I said simply. 2 years ago, with someone I thought felt the same. Raphael waited. He didn't push. He just stayed there, present, the same way I had stayed for him. It was intense, I continued, the words coming with difficulty as if they'd been stuck for so long. We had this connection, you know. I'd never felt anything like it. It felt like we understood each other without explaining. Like he really saw me. And what happened? Raphael asked softly. He decided seeing wasn't enough, I said, and a bitter laugh slipped out. Or maybe he decided what he saw was too much. I don't know. One day he just said he couldn't anymore. That it was too complicated. That he needed space to think. And he came back? Never, I answered. The space to think turned into a month. Then 2. Then he blocked my number and disappeared from my life as if I had never existed. Raphael squeezed my hand. I was destroyed, I admitted, feeling my eyes burn but blinking fast to keep the tears back. It wasn't just losing him. It was losing the belief that someone could really know me and still stay, that I was worthy of that kind of love. "Lucas," Raphael said, and there was so much pain in his voice that I lifted my eyes. "That's why I came to São Paulo," I explained. "To start over. To be invisible somewhere nobody knew me, where I wouldn't have to open up again. Where I could just exist without the risk of being seen and discarded." "And did it work?" Raphael asked. "Until you knocked on my door at 3 in the morning, I said. And this time my laugh was softer, more honest. Until you showed up asking for something your wife couldn't give. Until you forced me to see someone for real again." Raphael ran his free hand over his face, as if trying to process it all. "I'm making you go through the same thing," he said suddenly, his voice full of horror. "I'm making you open up, make you feel something. And I don't even know what I'll do tomorrow. I'm married, Lucas. I have a whole life on the other side of that hallway. I can't promise anything." "I know," I said softly. "Then why are you letting it happen?" he asked, and now there was urgency in his voice. "Why did you let me in? Why did you hold my hand? Why didn't you send me away when there was still time?" "Because you didn't knock asking for sugar or Wi-Fi," I replied. "You knocked asking to be seen. And I know that pain, Raphael. I know what it's like to be invisible even when people are looking straight at you." "But what if I hurt you?" he whispered. "What if tomorrow I go back to my life and you end up alone again, having opened up to someone who can't stay?" "Then I will have been brave," I said, and realized I believed it. I will have chosen to feel instead of protect myself. And that's already more than I've done in the last 2 years. Raphael looked at me for a long moment, as if trying to memorize every detail of my face. "How are you so strong?" he asked. "I'm not strong," I corrected. "I'm terrified. My heart is racing so fast I could have a heart attack. My hands are sweating. I want to throw up from fear. But I'm tired of letting fear decide for me." The silence that followed was different from before. Not tense or awkward. The kind of silence between two people who finally stopped lying, who finally admitted the naked, scary truth of who they are and what they feel. Outside, the darkness was starting to change. Not quite dawn, but the night was shifting. That strange hour between deep early morning and day, when the world holds its breath before waking. I looked at the window and realized it was probably 5. Maybe 5:30. In an hour, the sun would rise. In a few hours, the building would wake up. Amanda would wake up. Normal life would resume. And this impossible moment, this bubble of brutal honesty we'd created in the dark, would have to face the daylight. "It's almost dawn," Raphael said, following my gaze. "I know. I should go. I know." But neither of us moved. "Lucas," Raphael said after a moment, "I don't know what will happen. I don't know what I'll do when the sun comes up. I don't know if I'll have the courage to change my life or if I'll go back to pretending this night never happened." "You can't pretend it didn't happen," I said gently. "Not anymore. You saw yourself for real tonight. You said it out loud. You can't undo that." "I know," he whispered. "That's what scares me. Before I could pretend I didn't know, that I was confused, that it was just fantasy. But now I said it. I admitted it. To you and to myself. How do I go back after that?" "Maybe you won't go back," I said. "Maybe you'll move forward. Slowly. Your way. In your time." "What if I'm not brave like you?" Raphael asked. "What if I choose fear?" "Then you choose fear," I answered. "And I'll understand. Because I chose fear for 2 whole years. I don't have the right to judge." Raphael lifted my hand to his lips and kissed my knuckles softly. The gesture was so unexpected, so intimate, I stopped breathing. "You're incredible," he said against my skin. "Do you know that?" "I'm just someone who's as tired of being afraid as you are," I replied, my voice coming out hoarse. He lowered my hand but didn't let go. Instead, he looked at our connection, our fingers intertwined, the way we held each other, as if it were the only real thing in a suddenly unstable world. Then he looked at my other hand, at the gold wedding band gleaming in the dim light. I saw the exact moment reality hit. In his eyes, when he remembered. When the weight of everything at stake came back down. 5 years, he said softly. 5 years married. A house. A joint bank account. A whole family expecting us for Sunday lunch. Friends who see us as a couple. A whole life built around being the Raphael everyone expects. And who is the Raphael you want to be? I asked. He lifted his eyes to me, and in that look was everything. All the fear, hope, despair, and longing. I don't know yet, he admitted. But for the first time in my life, I want to find out. The light outside was definitely changing. The sky wasn't completely black anymore. There was a deep blue seeping in. The first sign the night was losing hold. Our borrowed time was ending. I don't want this night to end, Raphael whispered. Me neither, I admitted. But it will end. And we'll have to decide who we are when the sun rises. What if I don't know? Then you find out tomorrow, or the day after, or next week. But Raphael, I squeezed his hand. You can't go back to not knowing. That awareness you gained tonight won't disappear just because you want it to. He nodded slowly, as if processing a painful truth. Are you going to be okay? He asked suddenly. After I leave, when you're alone again. Are you going to be okay? I'll be different, I said honestly. I don't know if that's good or not, but I'll be. Lucas. No, I interrupted gently. Don't make promises you can't keep. Don't say we'll see each other again or that you'll find a way. Just be honest. Always. That's all I ask. Raphael pulled my hand closer, pressing his palm against mine as if trying to memorize every line, every detail. I'll be honest, he promised. With myself first. And maybe, if I can do that, I can be honest with everyone else. It's a start, I said. It's terrifying as hell, he admitted. Welcome to the club, I replied, and we both laughed. That kind of exhausted laugh you let out when you've weathered the emotional storm and survived, but you're still processing the damage. We stayed like that, hands entwined, looking at each other while the light outside kept changing. 2 men who'd been strangers a few hours earlier. 2 men who now shared something so deep there were no words for it. It wasn't love, not the kind people write songs about. It was something more fundamental, more true. It was the recognition of seeing someone wrestling with the same shadows you carry, the courage to say out loud the things you've spent years whispering to yourself alone. The gratitude of being seen, really seen in all your mess and fear and contradiction, without being rejected. The purest human connection I'd had in years. And even knowing it might be temporary, even knowing dawn would bring realities we couldn't control, even knowing there were no guarantees, it was worth it. Every second was worth it. Raphael looked again at the ring, then at me, then at the window where night was slowly giving way to day. And I saw the moment he made a decision. Not about the future, not about what he was going to do with his life or his marriage, but a decision about this moment, about how he was going to let this night end. He leaned forward, slowly, giving me time to pull back if I wanted to. I didn't pull back. He pressed his forehead to mine, and we stayed like that, breathing the same air, sharing the same impossible space intimate, without being sexual, deep, without being romantic. Thank you, he whispered against my skin, for letting me be honest, for not being afraid of my mess, for being brave when I couldn't. Thank you for knocking on my door, I whispered back, for reminding me that I can still feel, that it's still worth trying. We stayed like that until the light in the window shifted from deep blue to gray, until the first bird started singing outside, until the distant sound of a car passing on the street signaled that the world was waking up, until our borrowed moment of time finally came to an end. When we finally parted, the light at the window was no longer deep blue. It was gray pale, cold gray that comes just before true dawn, the kind of light that won't let you pretend it's still night. Raphael pulled away slowly, wiping his eyes. He wasn't crying anymore, but his eyes were still red, still carrying the weight of that night, and I noticed something strange in that moment. I wasn't afraid. Not the way I used to be. Not the kind of fear that made me step back when someone got too close. Something had changed. Not in the world outside. Not in the impossible circumstances. But inside me, as if a door I'd locked 2 years ago had opened again. Not wide, just ajar. Enough to let light in. Raphael looked at the window, then at the clock. 5:43. In less than an hour, the building would wake up. Doors opening. People leaving. The real world seeping into this space we'd created. He knows, I thought. He knows this can't last. And maybe that's exactly what made this moment matter so much. Because it was finite. Because it was stolen. Because it was real precisely because it had no guaranteed future. I have to go soon, Raphael said, his voice hoarse but firmer, before Amanda wakes up. I nodded. Of course he had to. Of course that had always been the invisible limit of our night. I'd known it from the moment he knocked. There'd always been a clock running. Always a set time for the end. But he didn't get up right away. He stayed on my couch, looking at his hands, at the wedding ring he'd been twisting so many times I'd lost count. You don't need to say anything, I said softly. You don't owe me explanations, Raphael. You don't owe me promises. He lifted his eyes to me, and there was something different there. Not relief, exactly. Recognition. As if he was truly seeing me for the first time, without all the layers of fear and denial he'd carried all night. I know I shouldn't, he said, but I want to tell you something. He took a deep breath, the kind you take before doing something brave and terrifying, something you know you need to do. I don't know what I'm going to do with my life, he began. I don't know if I'll have the courage to change anything. I don't know if I can be honest with Amanda the way I was with you. I probably won't. I'll probably go back to my apartment and keep pretending everything's fine, that I'm the man everyone expects me to be. He paused, and I saw pain cross his face. Not the dramatic pain from before, a deeper pain, quieter. The pain of someone who knows exactly which prison they're returning to. But I want you to know that tonight, he continued, these hours were the most honest of my entire life. I've never been so myself with anyone, not even with myself, and that, he looked straight into my eyes, changed something in me. I don't know what yet, but it changed. Something tightened in my chest. Not sadness, not exactly joy, more complicated. The awareness that I'd witnessed something important, that I'd been part of someone's transformation, even if I'd never know the full outcome. For me too, I replied, and my voice came out firmer than I expected. You reminded me that I can still feel, Raphael, that it's still worth trying, that being afraid of getting hurt isn't a good enough reason to never let anyone in again. We sat there, separated by about a foot of distance, but connected by something nameless. It wasn't love. At least not the kind of love that comes with promises and future plans. It was something else. Recognition, maybe. The rare feeling of being completely seen by another person, even if only for one night. Raphael finally stood up. He smoothed his rumpled shirt, ran a hand through his messy hair trying to pull himself together, preparing to walk back down that hall to his life. But before he went to the door, he turned to me again. Thank you, he said simply. For not running away, for letting me be a mess, for not demanding I be more than I can be right now. Thank you for knocking on my door, I answered, for trusting me with your truth. He smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a sad, complicated, real smile. The kind of smile that says, I understand, and this hurts, and it was still worth it all at the same time. Then he walked to the door. I followed him, and when I opened it, the hallway light spilled in, brighter now. Almost 6 in the morning, the world waking up, the borrowed moment coming to an end. Raphael stepped into the hallway and I stayed on my doorstep, watching as he crossed to his apartment. His door. His world. When he reached it, he put his hand on the doorknob. But before he turned it, he looked back. Our eyes met across the hallway. And in that look was everything we couldn't say. Recognition, gratitude, sadness, hope, and the awareness that something had happened between us that neither of us would forget. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He just looked at me. And I looked back. Then he turned the doorknob and disappeared into his apartment. The door closed with a soft click that echoed down the silent corridor. I stood there for another minute, staring at that closed door. On the other side, Raphael was returning to his life, the bed he shared with Amanda, the man he pretended to be. But also knowing that something had changed. In him, in me, in that invisible space between our doors. I went back inside and closed the door. The living room felt different. The couch still bore the mark where Raphael had sat. The glass of water was still on the coffee table, half empty. Physical evidence that it was real, that it wasn't just a dream or fantasy. I went to the window and looked out. The sky was getting lighter by the minute, pale blue pushing away the gray. The first rays of sun touching the rooftops. A new day, as if nothing had happened, as if the world hadn't shifted in the last 3 hours. But it had, at least for me. I remembered how I was 2 years ago, after Tiago broke up with me, after I swore I'd never let anyone close enough to hurt me. I'd built walls so high around my heart I could barely feel anything. And then Raphael knocked at 3 in the morning, not asking for romance or love, asking only for permission to be honest, vulnerable, and seen. And in seeing him, witnessing his raw honesty, something in me broke, or mended. I wasn't sure yet, but I knew one thing. I knew that when Raphael crossed that hallway back to his life, he took something with him, a piece of honesty he didn't have when he arrived, a knowledge about himself he could no longer undo. And he left something behind too. He left in me the memory that real connection was still possible. That vulnerability was still worth it. That being afraid didn't mean you couldn't be brave. I didn't know what happened next. I didn't know if Raphael and I would pass in the hallway and pretend nothing happened. I didn't know if we'd exchange meaningful looks or just nods. I didn't know if that night would start something or end with itself. And strangely, it was okay not to know. Because the value of that night wasn't in what it promised for the future. It was in what it had been in the present. 3 hours of absolute honesty. 3 hours of being seen and seeing someone for who they really were. 3 hours of remembering that beneath all our defenses and fears and social constructions, we were still human. Still in need of connection. Still capable of feeling. I heard a sound in the hallway. Footsteps. Someone leaving for work early. The building waking up. Normal life resuming its course. I moved away from the window and looked around my apartment. Everything looked the same as before 3 in the morning. Same mess on the table, same books, same loneliness. But something was different. I was different. I didn't know what I'd do with that difference. I didn't know if I'd have the courage to open that door more, the one Raphael had cracked. I didn't know if I could let someone in for real. But for the first time in 2 years, I wanted to. And maybe that was exactly what Raphael came for. Not answers, not solutions, not promises of happy endings. Just the courage to try. The courage to feel. The courage to be honest with yourself, even if only for one night. He had given me that, and I had given him that. And in the end, maybe it was all any of us could really offer. Not the future. Not certainties. Just a shared moment of truth. A moment of being completely yourself with another person and discovering that you survive. That you are seen. That you're not as alone as you thought. I took the empty glass and carried it to the sink. I washed it slowly, watching the water run, then dried it and put it away with the others. No physical evidence left, no proof that that night had happened. But I would remember, and Raphael would remember. And maybe when we crossed paths in the hallway tomorrow, next week, or next month, our eyes would meet for a fraction longer. In that moment, we'd recognize the truth. That night at 3 in the morning, 2 strangers had become something else. Not lovers, not partners, but witnesses to each other's humanity, to the vulnerability, courage, and honesty each of us carried beneath all the lies we tell ourselves. And that, I realized as the first golden light of the sun streamed through my window, was enough. It wasn't the happy ending stories promise. It wasn't reciprocated love. It wasn't the courage to change everything. But it was real. It was honest. It was human. And after 2 years of protecting myself from feeling anything, After building walls so high I'd trapped myself inside them, that small window of honesty was revolutionary. Raphael wasn't going to leave his wife. I knew that. Maybe he couldn't even fully admit it to himself. Maybe he'd go back to hiding, denying, constructing that acceptable version of himself he showed the world. But for 3 hours, he had been free. Completely free. Completely honest. Completely himself. And he had shown me that I could be too. I sat on the couch where Raphael had sat. I closed my eyes and breathed. I could feel the change in me, subtle but real, as if something frozen had started to thaw. Slowly, cautiously, but undeniably. I don't know what comes next, I thought. I don't know if I'll have the courage to do anything with this new openness I feel inside me. I don't know if Raphael will. But I know that this night happened. I know it was real. I know it was worth it. And when the sun finally rose fully, bathing the city in warm orange light at 6:30, I was still sitting there, not so afraid anymore, not so guarded, just human, just alive, just possible again. And across the hall, I imagined Raphael felt something similar, returning to the bed beside the wife who didn't know this version of him, pretending to sleep while processing everything, carrying a secret that changed everything and nothing, but different, fundamentally different. Because once you truly see yourself, once someone truly sees you, you can't fully pretend anymore. There's always a part that remembers, that knows, that felt, even if only for a few hours, what it's like to exist without masks. And maybe that was enough. Maybe the purpose of that night wasn't to change our lives completely. It was just to plant a seed, a possibility, a reminder that authenticity exists, and that when you experience it, it changes you forever. I finally stood up. There was work to do, deadlines to meet, normal life to live. But as I turned on my computer and looked at the bright screen, I knew nothing would be exactly the same, because Raphael had knocked, and I'd let him in. And in that simple act of opening a door at 3 a.m, we had opened something bigger. Not a relationship, not a future together, but a door inside each of us. A door back to ourselves, to the parts we'd locked away and forgotten. And once opened, even just a crack, that door never fully closed again. That was the truth Raphael brought, and the truth I'd reflected back. No promises, no solutions, no guaranteed happy endings. Just the courage to feel, the courage to be seen, the courage to be honest, even if only for 3 hours on a Saturday night. And in the end, maybe that was exactly what the two of us were looking for when our paths crossed in that quiet hallway. Not a neighbor, not a lover, not a savior, just a witness. Someone who looked without judgment, someone who saw without demanding, someone who allowed honesty without asking for promises. We had been that for each other. And now, as the day truly began and São Paulo woke up completely, while Raphael probably pretended to sleep in his apartment and I pretended to work in mine, we carried that truth with us. Changed, not saved, not cured, not with all the answers, but no longer completely alone, no longer completely afraid, no longer completely locked away, just a little more human, a little more honest, a little more alive. And sometimes I realized as morning settled and life moved on, sometimes that's all we can ask for, all we can offer. A moment of truth, a moment of being seen, a moment to remember that underneath everything we're still capable of real connection, even when that connection has no future, even when it can't be named, even when it exists only in the impossible space between two doors in a quiet hallway. It still matters. It still transforms. It's still worth it. And when life goes back to normal, when Raphael and I pass each other in the corridor and exchange only a polite nod, when the weeks go by and that night becomes only a memory, I will carry it with me. The memory that I was brave, that I felt, that I let someone in, even knowing they would have to leave, and that this didn't make the experience any less valuable. It made it more precious, because it was finite, because it was honest, because it was real. Raphael knocked at 3 a.m, seeking something his wife refused to give him, and what he needed, I discovered, wasn't romantic love. It wasn't sex. It wasn't a promise of a future. It was permission. Permission to be honest. Permission to be vulnerable. Permission to be seen as he truly was, even if only for a few hours. And by giving him that permission, I'd given myself the same. That was the exchange. That was the gift. That was the transformation. And as the sun climbed over São Paulo and a new day fully settled in, I knew that that night had been worth it. Not because it changed everything, but because it changed enough. Enough to remind me I was still alive, still capable, still worth trying. And sometimes, that's all a night at 3 a.m. needs to give us. Just the reminder that we are human, and that this, despite everything, is still beautiful. Even when it hurts, even when it's complicated, even when there's no happy ending, it's still beautiful, still worth it, still transforms us. And I, finally, was ready to let it transform me.